Donald Trump's nephew, Fred Trump, just came out and endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris over his uncle, Donald Trump, to be the next president of the United States. Now, this is a big deal. Fred Trump obviously knows Donald Trump very well. He is related to him. He has seen him behind the scenes, and he is sounding the alarm, saying that, yeah, to the American people, this guy's dangerous. He is not fit to serve. So I'm going to show you this video of Fred Trump endorsing Kamala Harris. We'll talk about it a little bit after, but here is Fred Trump.
I believe in policy over politics.
Yeah.
And without question, Kamala Harris's policies are what I get behind. So I will be voting for Kamala Harris. And if I'm asked, I will campaign for her without hesitation.
Good.
And if I
Yeah, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. As I mentioned, he knows Donald Trump very well, and he's saying, trust me, America, this guy's not good. This is not the guy for us. He will not make the country better. I'm endorsing and voting for Kamala Harris. He's even offering to campaign on behalf of Kamala Harris to do whatever he can to make sure that she gets elected and his uncle, Donald Trump, loses. I'm sure that this is an endorsement that the Harris campaign is pretty happy to have. And I would love to see him on the campaign trail. I would love to see a campaign event with him and other members of the Kamala Harris campaign or herself or a campaign surrogate, whatever it might be. I think that's a very compelling argument. How does the Republicans argue against someone who knows Donald Trump, is related to him, has been behind the scenes with him? It's a pretty tough argument to make against. So I think that's a great idea. And also, it's important to note that Fred Trump is not the only Trump family member who has come out against Donald Trump. Mary Trump, who I believe is Trump's niece, has been very vocal about her opposition to Donald Trump for quite some time now, and was even at the debate between President Biden and Donald Trump on behalf of the Biden campaign in the spin room. So, we have family members of the Trump family saying this is not your guy. We have former administration officials, former cabinet officials, former employees saying that Donald Trump behind the scenes is insane, that he is incompetent, that he should not be the next president of the United States, which is a pretty big deal. But in addition to Fred Trump's appearance on The View this morning, he's also been making other media appearances, and he actually sat down with ABC News the other day to talk about a couple of conversations he has had with Donald Trump in private, which are really damning. And Trump says some really disgusting things in these conversations that I think are really important for every American to hear. So take a look at that clip here.
Advocate for the disabled.
I was in the Oval Office 12 times and that was our mission, to advocate for people with complex disabilities. It culminated in May of 2020 in the Oval Office. Donald was there, and he was very gracious. Several other folks were there, including the group that we brought down. We dispersed. I was asked to go back and see Donald. He greeted me with his familiar, "Hey, pal, how's it going?" We sat down for a bit, and he just came out with, "These people, all the expenses, they should just die." He's talking about human beings who have complex issues, and the first thing he could say was, they should just die.
Fred claims this wasn't isolated, describing a phone call to alert his uncle the medical fund set up by the family for his son William was running low, a fund he says the former president consistently replenished.
A couple of years ago, I called him. I said, "Donald, the fund's running out." And without hesitation, he said, "Your son doesn't recognize you. Let him die and move to Florida."
Were you surprised?
That's a great question. My response was, "No, Donald, he does recognize me," and said, "Well, thanks," and hung up. Was I surprised? I don't think you could hear something like that and not be surprised. But that is what he has become. It's sad.
There's a chapter.
Wow. I mean, that is not only heartbreaking, it's just reprehensible. For Donald Trump to speak about our fellow Americans in this way is disgusting. There are so many millions of Americans out there who either know someone who is disabled or is related to someone who is disabled. And these comments from Donald Trump saying that many of these people should just quote unquote die, I mean, that is a slap in the face of every single one of those people. It's just a slap in the face. If Donald Trump doesn't even look at these folks, disabled Americans, as humans, how do we expect him to lead them? How do we expect for him to care about these folks and his policy. He doesn't look at them as human. How can we expect for him to care? We can't, because that's just who Donald Trump is. But in addition to this ABC News interview where he revealed a lot, he also spoke to ABC News and they wrote an article about the conversation they had about some things he revealed about Donald Trump, including the fact that behind the scenes as well, Donald Trump used racial slurs. Seriously. So take a look at the article on your screen. Fred Trump, the nephew of former President Donald Trump, said his uncle is, quote, atomic crazy, that he witnessed him using racial slurs decades ago, and that he plans, of course, to vote for Kamala Harris. The Trump way was to be, quote, complex and sometimes cruel, Fred Trump said in an interview with ABC News. And he went on to say, quote, and within every family, people know this, families are complicated. Every family has their crazy uncle. My uncle Donald Trump is atomic crazy, and he has put his mark on the family history. He said, as he talked about his new book, All in the Family, that is, I guess, coming out soon at some point, pressed to further explain, Fred Trump said, it means he does things that even as much as I know him when he's out there now, I sort of shudder and say, is this the same guy I knew? What's making him change? What got him this way? But that all being said, I've always had a good relationship. So that's pretty compelling stuff, saying that he is atomic crazy, that behind the scenes he is off his rocker. I mean, I think that's something we could have guessed, but having confirmation from a Trump family member is pretty stunning. And this is also, again, something that's pretty consistent with things we've gotten heard before from former administration officials. They've talked about an erratic Donald Trump in a toxic work environment where behind the scenes he is just insane. He's throwing things at the wall. He's throwing things at people. I mean, we have that infamous, I'd call it, testimony from the January 6th committee where he threw ketchup bottles at the wall at Mar-a-Lago. Crazy stuff. So really just a toxic individual. And of course, in addition to this, as I mentioned, he talked about when Donald Trump used the N-word in a really just awful, awful quote, saying in this article, I was about 10 years old and I was at my grandparents' house, like I was a lot. And Donald, I could hear him screaming. And I went down to the driveway of my grandparents' house, and there was his white Eldorado convertible with 2 slashes. Still remember it. And he had electrical tape because the roof was black. And he used the word, the N-word, twice, just saying who he thought probably had done this. Wow. That just gave me chills. I got to be honest. That is really horrific stuff. Really horrific stuff. And I do, again, feel it's very important to note that this is not the first time we've heard reporting like this. There are members of, I believe, The Apprentice, it was, who heard Donald Trump say the N-word specifically on audio and in conversation with them. So, yeah, this is another pretty consistent theme with Donald Trump. It just shows you who he really is, show that he doesn't really care about anybody but himself. He's very narcissistic, and he doesn't care about how the things he says affects people, how he says, to Fred Trump about his disabled son, how he talks about people of color. He just doesn't care. Now, of course, the Trump campaign denied this, saying in a statement to ABC News, Trump campaign communications director Stephen Chung denied the claims about the former president, saying, and get ready for this. I mean, this is a whole lot of hogwash, I would describe it as. Quote, this is completely fabricated and total fake news of the highest order. It is appalling a lie. It's appalling a lie so blatantly disgusting can be printed in the media. Anyone who knows Donald Trump knows he would never use such language, and false stories like this have been thoroughly debunked. Now, he's using the typical fake news because when something's reported that they don't like, they automatically have to call it fake. They never actually engage with it. And things like this have not been thoroughly debunked. It's just not true. So this is a very combative statement. If this was something that Donald Trump did not say and that there was no issue with, I don't think it would have been this combative. But now they're insulting people, saying that the media is this, that, whatever. But this is really, really revealing stuff. The fact that we have Trump family members, former administration officials, former employees, all who have seen Donald Trump behind the scenes, and they're all coming out saying, this guy is dangerous. You should not vote for this guy. I am not voting for this guy. I'm voting for Kamala Harris is pretty compelling. As I mentioned, how do you really argue against that? The Republicans don't. They just don't really engage with talking points like this. They don't engage with arguments like this. Where it's how do you actually argue against Mark Esper? How do you argue against James Mattis? How do you argue against Donald Trump's former Secretary of State, former Chief of Staff? How do you argue against Donald Trump's own family who are saying this guy is not fit to serve? They can't. These are people who know Donald Trump, have experienced him behind the scenes, and they are saying that he's not fit to serve. And that's a pretty strong argument as to why Donald Trump should not be president. You don't see that with Joe Biden. You don't see that with Barack Obama. You don't see that with Kamala Harris. You didn't even see it with some Republican presidents in history, many of which I disagree with. You never have these people's families coming out and saying this guy's not fit to serve. You don't have these people's former employees coming out and saying this. But when you have 40 out of the 44 former administration officials, 40 out of 44 coming out and saying, yeah, I'm not supporting Donald Trump, that's a big deal. When you have multiple family members coming out and saying, I'm not voting for Donald Trump, that's a big deal. When you have employees of Donald Trump, some that used to work on his campaign, some that have known him for quite some time, all the way back at the Apprentice days up until his presidential run and even his White House term, saying that they will not be voting for Donald Trump, that's a pretty big deal. So anyway, I'm thankful to Fred Trump for coming out and saying this stuff and informing the American people, because this is important. This is very important. It should be factored into the minds of the American people when we all go to vote this November. So anyway, I'll leave it there. I just wanted to bring this to your attention. I appreciate you watching the video. Make sure to subscribe down below. It goes an incredibly long way. Also, drop a like on the video and comment. Let me know what you think about all this. And as I always say, I greatly appreciate you, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.